Joining us now, senior senator from Virginia. He is the ranking member of the Senate Intel Committee, Democrat Mark Warner. Senator, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on. And I wonder, where are you in the swamp? Are you like in the really muddy part? Are you in the kind of clear part with the reeds? Just keep wondering, where's your intergalactic headquarters in that swamp?
It's like I'm on a glass bottom raft floating on the swamp with a flashlight looking at it. That's the way I would describe myself. But you gotta be here. All about
swamp creatures swimming underneath you, but that's a good place to be. So I just, I love your photos, and I love your description. I had to ask. But which part about the Republicans are you talking about now?
All right, first of all, we got a lot to talk about today, but I just want to get this off my chest. And I'm glad you asked that because I was just beside myself yesterday. We have got Lindsey Graham and your colleagues there, Bob Menendez, and you got Bob Corker, who's retiring. They're in the rotunda. They're in the well. Bob Corker, long speech, and they're all this outrage over the U.S. involvement in the Yemeni civil war, and they can't believe it, and they're going to have a vote to get out, and the Khashoggi was murdered by Mohammed bin Salman, and we're going to get out of the Yemeni civil war. Senator, we've been there for a 4-year period. President Obama got us in. I understand why he got us in, to placate the Saudis when he made the deal with Iran, but 50 million people have died. We've been backing the Saudi UAE coalition now for a 4-year period. 17 million people are starving to death. Children are eating leaves off trees to survive. The Saudis are blowing up school buses with U.S. bombs. And it took the murder of Jamal Khashoggi to make a speech on the Senate floor. And all of a sudden they're outraged, except Rand Paul and yourself, who has been skeptical of this thing from the beginning. Can you help us understand this whole thing?
God, you're giving me such a free shot here, but I can't fully take it. Let me break this into two pieces. First, the conduct of the war, and don't give me too much credit here because when the war started, and we were getting briefed in the intel community, and the legitimate government, or as legitimate as any government would be in Yemen, got kind of attacked by the Houthis. There'd been this ethnic tension in Yemen for a long time. And the Saudis came in. I think they came in with UAE and others. Rand Paul was against it from the beginning. I, honestly, was not. I felt that I'd seen enough evidence that the Houthis were, sponsored as well by Iran. The Saudis had been long-term allies. We obviously took military equipment. And for the first year, 2 years, I reluctantly went along. And although I would argue whether it's this war or Syria or elsewhere, Congress needs to stop ducking its responsibility and not have the courage of waiting till after the fact to complain. We should be voting our conscience at the beginning of these wars, the way the Constitution says. But in terms of the Saudi arrangement, it was the Saudis' frankly pitiful performance and their inability, both their military, after all the millions and billions of dollars we've sold them, of using this equipment in any way that was the way it was intended, with any kind of sophisticated targeting, with any kind of respect for you are in a war, but respect for some of the civilian casualties, to the point where, 6 or 7 months ago, I finally said, we got to send a message here, and I voted for the kind of Paul-sponsored resolution to say, hey, we need to put an end to this. That was kind of line number one. And some of the Republicans, not just Rand Paul, but Mike Lee, there were like 5 Republicans who voted with that. Then there came the Khashoggi. And on the Khashoggi incident, let me just say at the front end, I personally believe that the Saudis never would have been this outrageous of taking a hit team of 15 people, including a expert in dissecting human beings, to another consulate that was under President Reagan, under President Bush, under Clinton, under Bush 43, under Obama, because they would have just known, one, they would have never gotten away with it, and two, that there would have been huge pushback from the United States. Yet they still went out, and again, I can't talk about what I've seen or heard in classified briefings. I actually respect the confidentiality of top secret information, but I did not mind, frankly, after the most recent briefing when Senator Graham and Senator Corker came out and in pretty explicit terms said they'd reached the conclusion that the Crown Prince, MBS, he goes by those initials, had to have been at least involved in the circumstance. So maybe Graham and Corker are late to the Khashoggi issue and somewhat late to the Yemeni issue, but there is a little bit of conflating of the two. I mean, you could be upset with the war in Yemen, but not upset with Khashoggi, or vice versa. But they have been conflated at this point. Does that make any sense? I know it's kind of complicated.
Yes.
But does that make any sense?
Yeah. I mean, look, certainly the Khashoggi issue brought it to a head. But, your counterpart, Tim Kaine, vice presidential candidate, and many others have been calling for a new AUMF for 6-7 year period. It's never been debated. It's never gotten to the well. And so, I got to hear Bob Corker yesterday going off on his retirement swan song from Tennessee, and he did nothing to bring an AUMF to the floor. Either did half of these guys. So they shun responsibility, and now it becomes a swamp sideshow for TV cameras, and all of a sudden they're feigning outrage. I mean, I just couldn't believe that. But to get back to what you said, I mean, I get what you're saying, that the Saudis acted in a way that was beyond the pale of comprehension. And maybe they did that because they were confident about the relationship they had established with the Trump administration. But the difference here, the one change, because you mentioned this wouldn't have happened under Obama, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, is Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, he's 33 years old. The guy he's intemperate, he's impulsive, he's dangerous, and he's proven to be incompetent. I mean, that's a pretty toxic trifecta. Don't you agree? How do you deal with this guy?
John, I agree. And I think what happened was, and I'm not trying to take a cheap shot here, I think that, even the end of the Obama administration, they were interested in, MBS, because MBS, within the kind of wild world of Saudi royal politics, MBS's cousin was originally, they thought, was in line to be the next king. MBS came in, kind of moved out the cousin. What MBS has done, let's just take a couple moments before we talk about Khashoggi. MBS basically took lots of his cousins and others who were wealthy in Saudi Arabia, locked them up at the Four Seasons Hotel or one of the high-end, or Ritz-Carlton is one of those two, for months, and basically held them hostage until they coughed up a lot of their money. MBS took the Lebanese prime minister, invited him to Saudi Arabia, and then basically held him hostage for some period of time. MBS, also connected with UAE, ended up getting in this major spat with Qatar, another member of the Gulf Coordinating Council. So MBS has taken these impulsive actions, but there was, and not to defend the Trump administration or the end of the Obama administration, MBS also seemed to indicate early on that he was going to liberalize the country, that he was going to be a firm line against Iran, that he was a guy who allowed women to go ahead and start driving. And I think there was hope that he was somewhat of a reformer, had these grand plans on moving Saudi Arabia ahead. But as you pointed out, his arrogance and his youth, and frankly, on a bunch of policy levels, just plain incompetence, I think has changed the mind of the majority of folks, at least in the Senate, Democrat or Republican. So I do think but the challenge, John, is, and public domain as well, that most people assess that he's pretty much knocked out most all of the other royal family. He's got control of most of the guns in Saudi Arabia, as well as the police and in the interior forces. There is a question of, how do we send this message? How do we put limitations? How do we stand up for American values in a way to put pressure on this guy to be another alternative in the short term?
Do you have enough votes to get out of this war?
I think, again, great question, very straight. We have enough votes to pass something that would restrict our ability to conduct this war in the Senate. There are not enough votes in the House today. There will be enough votes, come January 3rd.
So you're confident that, because what I'm hoping the president does is he doesn't fight this and need a 2/3, because remember, I was on the campaign. He campaigned.
Oh, I know, John. I know.
He campaigned to get out of Yemen, Syria. Then we get McMaster in there. The neocons come in, and they convince him otherwise. So hopefully you've got the votes to get out of this thing, because it's been a total disaster. Now, the president has also said, look, I've got a transaction end of the business with them. They're buying weapons. I've got a $450 billion memorandum of understanding. Actually, that's just like a handshake. That's just a handshake.
I'm sorry. Let me go ahead.
Go ahead.
That number at $450 billion, or even the number at $110 billion. Again, I can't get into the class, but that's just not true. It's just not true. Mm-hmm. Are there a lot of military sales? Absolutely, but they don't get. Even in Trumpian, hyping language, it is not true. And one of the things I'm trying to get, and I think it would be appropriate if the United States government actually indicated the volume of military sales. Listen, it's a lot. There are a number of American companies that rely upon these sales, but the 110 and then the 450, they're just not accurate numbers.
All right, so it's a memorandum of understanding, but as we've heard now, it's probably in the $10 to $15 billion range is what's actually real.
Might be more than that, but it's not where he's at.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So that's not that big of a deal. So you've got the Yemeni situation. Because of the Khashoggi debacle, do you see are you in favor of any other changes to the long-term KSA-USA strategic relationship as it relates to the Saudis being the buffer to further Iranian aggression?
I think, well, first of all, like him or dislike him, the contrast between how George Bush 41 would build these kind of alliances, manage these relationships, and Trump 45 couldn't have been clearer. And again, I think a lot of America's been thinking about that. I was at the funeral yesterday. Just again, respectfully, I think the Bush 41 notion that America is the most essential nation in the world, it has to be strong economically, militarily, but also it's got to be strong on a moral basis, is where I hope our country goes back to. And, Saudi Arabia has been a bulwark, Iran, but as we see now, when they use their military, frankly, we've trained them, we've worked with them, we've sold them some top-level equipment. They're just not a very competent military. And I think we're not going to – I don't see another nation-state in the region that is as large or as powerful that can be the bulwark against Iran. You can't – UAE, Jordan, some of the other the Emiratis, they don't have the heft, but the Saudis, as we've seen, John, going back to 9/11, they have, I think, for a number of years, they've been on one level allies with the West, on the other level an effort to make sure that they maintain the Muslim holy sites and don't have the kind of ISIS or other Islamic terrorist extremists take on the kingdom, they've also been willing to not cut off funding to those groups. Now, one thing that MBS has done is that he has cut back on some of the fundings of the madrasas that have been, frankly, the breeding ground of a lot of terrorism. But there is not, at this moment in time, I've not heard yet what is the cleanest, absolute, guaranteed best route for America on how we realign this relationship. But I do think we cannot continue to support the way the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has exercised this war in Yemen. It's just not. It does not help. And frankly, I think our other allies in the region are suspicious about Saudi Arabia as well in terms of their inept exercising of the war.
Great analysis. Let's hope we can get out of this thing sooner rather than later and maybe give humanitarian aid to the 17 million people in Yemen right now that are suffering from famine that you can't find on CNN or Fox News, because they'd rather talk about my next topic, which is...
but just one last thing. But let me I want to go to the next topic, but I do want to say here, it isn't like the Houthis have got clean hands. There's not a lot of...
Right.
I'm not sure who we look at as the good guys, because the Houthis are receiving Iranian materials,
right,
Iranian support, and they have, not very competently as well, shot missiles from their controlled territory into Riyadh, the Saudi capital. So let's again, I believe we need that humanitarian aid. I believe we need to do all we can to bring about a ceasefire, but it's not like, especially out of John Frederick. I don't want your listening audience to sit here and think you're out there defending the Iranian-backed Houthis either.
Well, yeah, we're not. But, I mean, if you take the billions of dollars that Mohammed bin Salman has spent on war, on his war machine in Yemen, if he took that money and had originally gone to the Yemenis government and said, I'm going to invest $40 billion in schools and roads and infrastructure and throw the Houthis out, I think you've been a lot better off. Look, hindsight is 20/20, but we're both
if he wouldn't have bought the $500 million yacht from the Russian oligarchs, that would have been probably and the big villa outside of Paris, and some of the largest, most expensive paintings in the world. That might have been pretty good too.
I want to get to your national cybersecurity policy speech tomorrow, and just start. We've got about 3 more minutes with the Mueller investigation. 18 months, millions of dollars, 60 lawyers, unlimited resources. When does this thing end, Senator Warner?
Well, on Mueller, I want it to end as soon as it can. But I also think, I want to know what is all the information that General Flynn has given out that it got him down to no jail time. I want to know what else Michael Cohen has to offer. I got to believe, John, and I know you're a big supporter of the president, but I would have thought that most Republican delegates in June of 2016, that it would have been a relevant fact for them to know as they were trying to decide whether they wanted to nominate Donald Trump or not, if they would have known that in June of 2016, Trump and Trump Enterprise folks were still trying to do a business deal with Russia, with a Moscow tower, and they were still trying to deal with senior-level officials in the Russian government. I just think that would have been a relevant fact. Now, the president can argue it's not illegal, he's just trying to do business. Well, if it's not illegal, why did he lie about these contacts with Russia during that time period? So I want it to be over, John, trust me. But I also think the sooner, I think Mueller was holding off until through the election cycle, until he got the answers from the president. My hope is over the next couple of weeks we will see the results of his work. Again, we're at 7 guilty pleas and over 30 indictments. I do not believe this is a witch hunt.
All right, so are you in favor when this document comes out that it be made available to the public, full transparency, what's ever in it, let us all see what's in it?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as we protect, if there were human intelligence or other intelligence, NSA intelligence on how we got this material, I think those methods need to be protected.
You have a major speech tomorrow on national cybersecurity policy, 10:30 a.m. in the well of the Senate. Give us a little heads up on it, Senator, if you will.
Truth is, I believe that the fundamental threats to our nation have dramatically changed. I worry sometimes, and I believe we got to have a strong defense, that we're spending $716 billion on our military budget. I worry that we're buying a lot of 20th century stuff in terms of tanks and trucks and guns and ships, when most of the conflict in the 21st century is going to be in the cyber domain, it's going to be in the misinformation, disinformation domain, it will be in the domain of space, and we have not had a cyber doctrine for the last 20 years, and it doesn't matter Democrat or Republican. So near-peer adversaries like Russia and China have been able to steal from us, have been able to interfere with our elections because we've not had any rules of engagement. I think the same way we had rules of the road around landmines, chemical weapons, we need rules around cyber, where if we say to our adversaries, if you come in and attack us with ransomware on our hospital systems or try to turn off our electric grid, we're going to go after you. We've been reluctant to use offensive capabilities. I think we have to bring offense into the mix. I think we need a series of international norms so that certain activities, everybody kind of knows ahead of time that if you do this stuff, whether you're attacking us or the Brits or whomever, countries are going to be able to punch back in a way with a lower level of attribution. And I think we need to really build in much higher cybersecurity standards, low-hanging fruit, for example. There's something called the Internet of Things, as every device we buy is going to be connected to the Internet. Right now, we don't even have minimum security standards. It is crazy that, if you're buying a refrigerator or an Internet or a microwave that's connected to the Internet, there's not basic security put in. Everybody in the intelligence community says we should have that, but unfortunately, the manufacturers have not wanted to go ahead and put in that minimum security. We got to change that. Yeah, there's a lot more to it, but I'm not saying my ideas are perfect, but it at least gives an organized approach. And the good news in this is, John, there's nothing Democrat or Republican about this. This is where the front lines of American national security have to be increased.
You're on the cutting edge of it, no doubt. I'll be live at your speech tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. We'll be looking forward to seeing that and then being able to put it out there. I want to thank Senator Mark Warner for being with us. Complete disclaimer,
John,
as I like to be honest with everybody, I did publicly back Mark Warner's re-election campaign in 2014, and I voted for him.
And every time you say that, John, you lose a bunch of listeners, but God bless you for saying it.
I mean, I am who I am, and I believe in what I believe, and I would vote for you. Again, we don't agree on a lot of stuff, but I like the fact that you tell it like it is, and I appreciate that. Senator Mark Warner, thanks for being with us.
Yeah.